Good evening, everyone. What I want to focus on with this video is just all the lighting effects that you can do for exterior scenes. Now, some of you may have seen my previous video like this one. It's where I took an interior scene and then I just went through every single effect and kind of how it's going to affect the current scene that we're in, and then just like isolating the effect, what it actually does. This video is not necessarily meant to be watched all the way through. If you do that, I really appreciate it. But the reason why I make this is sort of like a resource that people can come back to. So if you want to know like what Bloom does, for example, then you can download the folder from the link in the Google Drive below, or you can just go to the part that I'm going to bookmark in the video, and you can just watch the Bloom part and go back to what you're doing. But as I said, if you want to watch the entire video, it would help me out a lot and you might learn something interesting. Now, for this video, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this example scene because unfortunately in the last video I made, I was using an Evermotion scene, so I couldn't actually give out the model, which in hindsight was probably not the best idea. So in this one, I just wanted to use the one that was provided by Lumion. The first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to go into photo mode here. I'm going to go and find an angle that I kind of like. We're going to be removing all of these effects here. So I'm just going to go through and delete these, but I might move the camera up a little bit. I do recommend that you kind of do like fix the camera and stuff before you actually start adding effects in, just because that's kind of like the first thing you do. Like you say, like, this is what I want, and then you kind of build on it. It's the foundation. So I'm just going to move it up a little bit, maybe something like that. Maybe move it a little bit closer. Yeah, something like that. And then I think the focal length, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger because I want it to just take up more of the screen and kind of make it seem taller, I guess. Like if it's way back here, you know, not only does it kind of warp the sides, but you're also making it look smaller, which I don't know. I guess I just prefer this shot here because it really focuses on the building. So maybe I'll just angle that a little bit and I'll hit store camera. Okay, so we kind of have like the baseline here, but now we can start to add some effects in. So with exterior scenes, it's actually even more important to start with the real skies than it is in interiors. So normally in interiors, I do start with the real skies, but that just kind of get the idea of like where the sunlight's going to be coming in. Exteriors, though, like since it's such a since it's such a crucial part, I really recommend that you do this first because the where the sun position is will actually affect a lot of the lighting effects that you can do, things like God rays and volumetric sunlight. And while they're not the most common, it is just good to keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to add the effect real skies. I never use just the plain sun effect. You can use it. I think that real skies is just better. And what I'm actually going to be doing is I'm only going to find the lighting that I want for real skies, and then I'm going to bring in my own HDRI sphere and I'm going to find the exact image that I want. The real sky image works completely fine. Like if you don't want to do the step that I'm going to show you, there's no problem in doing that. It is just kind of how I do that. So yeah, I'll find it like right here. I guess I don't really need to move it, that's fine there. And then yeah, so I'm going to just find kind of what I want. You could have it so that the sun is sort of behind you, and you have all the trees on the road here, and it's lighting up your building. Or you can kind of go for a shot like this where it's kind of coming down the street. Now the problem with where we are right now is that we would kind of like to have the sun here, but it doesn't really work for this shot. So I will probably save a second one here. And then I'm going to copy this because there are some things I want to show you where I'm going to need the sun here, but it's not really what I like for this shot. Like it's not going to be the final image. So I'll just save that in. Okay, so I'll move that like right here. And then we can start to just kind of look at some of the effects. So the first one that I will start with is the God ray. So God rays, it's not one that I use too often, and I think that if you do use this, you want to make it kind of like not too strong, because I find that this can really overpower a scene. Like as you can see here, because of where the sun is, you're getting like these really strong rays come out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the decay all the way down. Now, what the decay does is just to kind of specify what each of these sliders do. The decay will take these almost like these beams, and then it'll make it so that when it's near the actual sun, it's really strong, but then when it's further away, it's weaker. And then the length obviously is how far it actually stretches, and then the intensity is how strong those beams actually are. So it is a little bit weird because they all interact with each other, but they are kind of similar in ways, but they're not the exact same. So as you can see, if we go decay up, it's a little bit weird that when decay is all the way down, it's the furthest. But as you can see, like when we move the decay up, it's kind of it's receding. And even when decay is all the way at the end here, so this is the maximum decay, we are still getting these kind of like lines here. So yeah, you'll be able to see this better. So if I bring the decay all the way down, then here goes the length. Now this is kind of what I was talking about with the decay. You can kind of see it like gradually coming back, and it's like very, I guess, like fluid. But with the length, you see these like hard edges, and all it's doing is retreating closer to the sun. So if you want it, you can have it so it's just kind of right there, and then you move the decay up, and then what you're gonna get is almost like this like blurry line near the edge of the building, but it's not going to completely take over the scene. So if you are doing it like this, that's kind of what I recommend, where it's like all you're kind of getting here is like these, like, I guess it's almost like softening the edge of the building. Like it's getting it like a really strong sunlight, but it's not destroying the scene, because as you can see, like the intensity too, like that kind of just like speaks for itself. Like when it's all the way up, the sun's extremely strong, or the God rays. And then as it goes down, you're not getting as much of an effect. So I think if I go like this, that's too far. Maybe length down here, decay, the intensity. I'm just going to play around with this so I can get it. So when it's right here, as you can see, like it's kind of, the length just makes it retreat closer to the sun. The decay is going to make it so all those beams are not as strong. And like this is too strong here. Like I don't think you should see this, like these lines here. Like you just don't want that. So the length I normally bring way down if I do use it. It just softens the edges. And then the intensity I'd probably bring way down too. And so it's, in my opinion, with the God rays, like it's very easy to kind of blow your scene out with this. Like I wouldn't use it too much. But yeah, if we just flick it on and off, you can kind of see like it just kind of lights up the sky a little bit, the way I used to like to use it, because it's just I think that it's like when it's turned up, it just kind of blows your scene out. So I wouldn't use that too much. And the next thing I'm going to add is volumetric sunlight. Before I look at that though, I'm just going to remove the God ray so we can see it normally. Now, volumetric sunlight is one that, like, when I first started using Lumion, I really didn't understand what the purpose of this was, because this is the default setting. So I was like, oh, okay, like this is, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why would it be like this? You do have to crank it way down, and we're going to be able to kind of see how that works. So it's kind of a weird one too, because the range is set so it's like when it's at 0, it's right up to the camera. And then if you turn it up, as you can see, it just kind of blows the whole scene out. But as you start to turn it up, you can kind of see it like receding. Now, this is kind of nice to add, almost like it's like a bit of a fog effect, obviously, like the volumetrics. But I do find that what can be weird about it is that as you kind of extend the range, it's kind of hard to control, because sometimes like maybe I want it on this building down here, but when I bring it up there, then it's kind of affecting right here. So it's hard. Yeah, you can see like when I move this up, if you watch right down here and right up here, they're kind of linked. So this is another one where it's like, you can kind of give this like almost like this hazy effect, like this, like the volumetric sunlight, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to use this one. Like if you're a beginner, I wouldn't worry too much about this. But it is good to just kind of see like what it does. So that's why I wanted to include it in this. If I was using it, I'd probably turn it up maybe like here, and then even just turn the range up, because what I do find is that it can help you give, like, as I said, like almost like a haze from the sun. So that one too, I'll turn that. That's actually a really good example. Like you can see kind of what that does. It does actually kind of make the sky look a little bit nicer, because it takes away a bit of the saturation, but there are ways around doing that doesn't kind of affect the rest of the scene. So yeah, I think now we'll look at sun study. So this one is kind of cool. I will disable real skies for this. So this one doesn't use the real skies, obviously, but I do actually think it's a pretty cool little effect, because it lets you mimic the sun in your area. So if we go to edit, and this may not actually work because I'm filming this at night, so let's see what happens. So if I click on Nova Scotia, hit yes, yeah. So as you can see, it kind of makes it like nighttime like this. So I guess we'll just say like 12. The day is, I don't know, I guess there's no way of really updating itself, but December 2021, or wait, no, not December, January 2. And yeah, as you can see, so it's nighttime now. But let's say that it's, we'll go like here. So as you can see, like you can actually match where the sun would be in relation to the building on certain days. So what this could be really good for is if you're either doing an exterior or an interior, and maybe you need to convey to the client like how the sun is going to interact with the windows. You know, maybe there's like a large lobby or something like that has large windows, and by doing this, you can see like how the sun is going to enter these windows, and maybe it's just not practical to have them like that. So this is it's a tool you don't use too often, but if it is important to understand like how the light is going to interact with your scene, then Sun Study is really good for that. This is one that I didn't actually make a folder for. As I mentioned, I put all of the effects into folders that you can download, and you can kind of flip through them just to see how they all work. But I didn't bother doing one for Sun Study because there's too many variables, and you kind of get the point just by watching that. So I will get rid of that one. And I guess for good measure, I'll just pull the sun in here. This is kind of the outdated sun in Lumion. Like you can still use it. And this is what you can animate to make it like a time lapse. But in my opinion, like the real skies are actually polygon HDRIs that were kind of like brought specifically into Lumion to give really nice lighting. So I always use them. Like I don't think I've ever made an exterior scene where I just use the sun like this, but it is pretty straightforward. Obviously brightness, sun disk. I think that just affects like shadows, but yeah, I thought I might as well mention it just so that it's thorough. For the weather, these were ones that I also didn't include in the folder just because they're not really lighting, but I figured that I kind of go through them quickly. So fog, in my opinion, actually kind of works better in some ways than the volumetric sunlight. It will kind of take away the sky a bit more, but I find that it has better control, I guess, like in these areas. So as you can see here, the fog isn't like at just these settings, the fog isn't affecting my building. So I'm getting that really clear image, but you're almost getting like a vignette effect over here where the buildings are kind of like fogged out. So it almost looks like this like hazy, sort of like smoke, but I find that this kind of like really it encapsulates the building. So if maybe there's like a lot of stuff going on the side streets that's like really busy, you can kind of put this on and that will help that. You can also turn up the brightness, which I don't want to do too much because as you can see, it kind of takes away too much from the sky. So that's just something to keep in mind. But that's you can use these for that for like exterior effect. It's not really that necessary. I definitely wouldn't say it's one of the most important ones you have to use, but you can kind of do that just to give like some, I guess like I kind of use it to block out the background there just to focus more on the building. And then precipitation. So this one can actually have some really cool effects because what you can even do is you can turn the particle size and the quantity down, and then having wet grounds in Lumion looks way better than having just asphalt, in my opinion. It doesn't work for every scene, but if we just go back to the exterior view here, and we go to we'll add a reflection plane in. This is not one that I really am going to focus on, but I will just toss this in quick. Put that there, and then if we put on so normals is on, we'll also do speed rate reflections. So what I kind of like about this is that you just get you get all this color on the ground here, whereas like before it's just like this flat gray color. This just brings your scene a little bit more to life. And something that I will actually do right now, this is kind of interesting, but how they did this example video or this example scene is they actually just put these like random lights or these pictures of like interiors in here. And it actually works really well if you just come in here and turn the emissive up a little bit. If we hop back to our photo mode, then you kind of get this like nice sort of lit up interior. It might be kind of hard to find like images that work well, but I thought that was kind of cool how they did that. It's definitely the first example scene that they did it like that. Okay, so I kind of went through those ones. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back into my main angle, and I'm just going to tweak this lighting a bit. I realize I probably didn't need to make the second one now, but whatever. So I kind of want to have it so it's like here, and then I think I'm going to find one that lights up the scene a bit better. Maybe I'm going to go to like clear. It doesn't, this is what I was talking about, where it doesn't really matter how like the clouds are going to look, because I'm going to bring in my own HDRI after this one. Except the way that HDRIs work in Lumion is you can't actually import the HDR files, but what you can do is bring in a sphere that's unwrapped correctly, and then you can put that like a JPEG onto that sphere, and then you have basically your own HDRI image, which in reality that's all you need, because you can make the lighting match up. Like no one would be able to tell. And yeah, from there you just have more control over like the emissiveness, the saturation, and I like doing that a little bit more than just using real skies. So if I go to clear here, like that looks pretty good, I think. Maybe we'll change the heading. This is giving like a really nice effect of a bright day. It does look a little bit bright, so maybe, yeah. So this is kind of the problem like I have, is like the overall brightness, I find that it really only affects like the sky. It doesn't actually affect the scene. And that's kind of what I was talking about, where I like to bring the HDRI in, because it lets me have control over the lighting and then the image separately. Right, so I think that is good. Like I think that the lighting right here is good enough to start. And then the next thing that I'm going to look at is, okay, so we're all done with that one. So we're done with that one. Now I am going to put on the 2-point perspective. I'm not exactly sure the best way to describe how this works, but I like to put it on basically all my exterior scenes. I believe that it kind of, it does like some math almost, and it makes it so that the lines, I guess they're just more in line. I'm not really sure exactly how to describe that, but as you can see, this is the effect that it gives you, and it just makes everything look a little bit more like polished, I guess. This kind of gives you like a weird angle going up the building, where it almost looks like the building's getting smaller, and this kind of fixes that. So that's how I would kind of describe it. I guess it's a fairly simple effect, but I'm not sure exactly like the scientific way of describing that, I guess. Now lens flare I am going to get into, but that one I need to make it a nighttime scene, and then we'll go through all that stuff. So one that I really like to add in though is bloom. Bloom is one that it kind of takes like the light sources in your scene and just makes them like pop a little bit more, like almost like there's like rays coming out for them, but it's not quite the same as God rays. This one works really well in my opinion, and I think if I actually turn, maybe I'll hop back into this one just to demonstrate that. I'll get rid of this, and this. I'll flip the real skies back on, and yeah, if it's over there, that's fine. So I will actually go to bloom again, and then as you can see, so when bloom is on 0, we kind of have that same effect, but as it goes up, the sunlight is getting stronger. But this one looks just a lot more natural to me, because just the way that it kind of goes over the building, it just doesn't look like it's like blocking the scene. It just looks like it's a very strong light. And what I am actually going to do is I'm going to pull up some of these images just so I can show you what I was talking about. So here is an example scene that I did. So this is bloom on 0. This is 0.2. This is 0.5. This is 1. This is 2. And then this is 5. So as you can see, 5 is like not usable, but I think that somewhere around 0.2 or 0.5 gives you a really nice effect. It just makes it look like it was kind of taken into Photoshop, touched up. For this one, I'm probably going to do something like 0.5. So go like right here. I guess I have to do it in this one. It is a little bit weird hopping back and forth. It's just like I don't want to I don't want my sun to kind of be behind the building, but having the sun behind the building like that is the best way to show the examples. So I will have to hop back and forth a little bit. So we'll leave the bloom in. That's good. Analog color lab, I'm not going to get in that too much today, just because like I did want to make a video about it. It is kind of a weird effect where it almost like you can change how colors are treated in your scene, I guess. And I have seen some people use it, but most of the time when they use it, they're not putting it on very high. Like they're not letting the full effect take over. They're just kind of using it a bit to like tweak colors. And yeah, so that's why I don't want to get too much into that. Something that I will add in right now, but I'm going to come back to it, is the Styrofoam mode. I really like this effect because it can actually just show you how the shadows and the light are going to look in your scene. I've never actually used this as like a rendering style that I've printed out and given to someone, but I do use it a fair bit, especially just to kind of see how the shadows are working in my scene. So I'm going to turn that off for now, but I'm going to come back to that. And the one that I am going to do now is Skylight. So Skylight adds a lot. It can add a lot of render times to your scene, but it can actually add a lot of quality. This is another one that I've just kind of gone through, and I have just done some examples of how it looks, because there are quite a bit of examples of it moving around. So when the skylight is on 0 in this particular scene, as you can see, like, you're getting almost like this like orange glow to everything. There's not really much light hitting here. I think that there may be like a little bit of hyperlight on, and that's why you're seeing that. But if we go up, then you can see it right here. That's how the brightness is changing. Like, it almost completely changes the color in this side here. Like, it gives it almost like a bluish tint to it. And in my opinion, this makes the scene look a lot more realistic. This one just doesn't look real. Like, it almost looks like it's been photoshopped so much that it's not real. But then this one has, I guess, like more natural bounce lighting. Like, this is kind of more what you would expect. If we go all the way up, you see the brightness. Now, I don't completely understand how this works, because as you can see, the skylight here is definitely stronger kind of in these corners, but I don't get why it makes the sun get darker, or sorry, the sky get darker. And this is another reason, as I was saying, I use the HDRI, because I can just control that directly. I don't completely understand that, but you can definitely see the changes of the higher up it goes, the less the shadows are visible. So like right here, this line right here is like, there's a very high contrast. So here's the sun, here's the shadow. If we go up one, still a contrast, you can see it, but if we go to the ultra, it's very low. And as you can also see, like, everything is getting a bluish tinge to it. Okay, so here's another example. So this one is skylight with the brightness turned all the way up to 2, but the render quality is normal. And then this is the exact, or wait, sorry, here it is here. So the brightness here, actually, I think did I do that in a weird way? Okay, I think they're just named a little bit weird, but as you can see, so the ultra, this is ultra, and then, right, okay, so I did that in sort of a weird way, but this one is the, let me just close this out quickly just so I can organize these in a bit of a better way. I thought that I already went through and did this, so I apologize for that, but I just want to make sure that these are not in a weird order. Okay, so here, just close that out and open it back up. So here we have 0 brightness, 1 brightness, and then brightness of 2. So that's kind of a better example. Now, you are sort of getting the same effect here. Like, these are very noticeable, or the change here is very noticeable, going from 0 to 1, but 1 to 2 is not that much. I'd probably keep it at like 1. That's probably good enough. The other thing that I just want to look at quickly is the saturation. So if we pull this up, this is skylight on 1 brightness normal with no saturation. But this is the same effect, but the saturation turn all the way up. The best way that I would kind of describe this is when saturation is at 0, it's a very warm sunlight. So as you can see, it's like everything's very orange. But when it's at 2, it's just an unnatural like blue. I don't think you'd ever go up to 2 in a normal scene, or even going to 0. Like, I feel like you kind of want to stay close to 1, but you can just sort of tweak the scene to be exactly what you would need. And so, yeah, this one is also a ultra. So I'll just move that out of the way. Just got the brightness high. All right, so here's a better example too of the saturation. Sorry if I keep flipping through the pictures here. That's kind of how I just want to set up this video, so that, like, as I said, like, we can just like look and easily see everything, because these are the final images. They're not just the previews. So for skylight, this is the styrofoam mode that I was talking about, with the saturation of 0, 1, and 2. So it's really easy to see kind of how the colors function there. What's kind of interesting about looking at it in styrofoam mode is this is like orange. This almost has like almost like a purplish hue to it, and then you have the blue. I don't know why the blue is so much stronger compared to the other ones, but you can really see kind of how that works. So for a scene that you want it to be like blue, I'd even just use it like 1.2. And if you want it like, not as blue, I probably would use it like 0.7 or 0.8. Anything more than that, and you really start to get these like color effects. So yeah, that's something that I would keep in mind. And let me just pull this up one more time. So these, yeah, so just to kind of show you, so this is this with the skylight render quality on high. These are kind of a weird one because I don't even know if it's worth the changes, because like ultra really adds a lot to your render time. Like I think it's like almost 4 times as long for just the skylight effect compared to normal, but it doesn't really give you a better look in my opinion. So if you're doing like a still and you like it, go for it, but I would not use high or even ultra for the animations. So this is the ultra, and then this is ultra with high brightness on. And yeah, this is kind of what I was talking about, where I find it strange that I guess I just find it weird how the brightness works. Like I don't understand why turning up the brightness of skylight makes the actual sky darker. So this is with the brightness all the way up on ultra, and this is with it at the brightness at 1, but same on ultra. So all it's changing is the brightness, but you are getting, it almost seems like it takes it away from the sky and like puts it into the shadows. It's kind of strange. I don't really use those ones too much. What I normally do is maybe I'll turn up to like 0.2, so it is a little bit brighter. Saturation I like to turn down at like 0.9 because I don't like it as blue. Maybe even like 0.8. Skylight and planar reflections and projected reflections. You could do these ones. If you don't have too many projected reflections in your scene or reflection planes, they don't do anything. Like they're completely reliant on that. So I think that's kind of a good start with that one though. That's what we'll do for skylight. Next thing we're going to look at is Hyperlight. So this one is kind of this is kind of like a global illumination 2.0. I'm really not sure why they didn't just remove global illumination, or why they didn't call it something else. Like I feel like a lot of people don't really know what Hyperlight means, but this is actually one of the more important ones you use. So I definitely enable this in the preview so you can see what's going on. If I turn this all the way up, as you can see, like you're kind of getting like, you kind of get like the light bouncing in these areas, but if I turn it all the way down, then this area stays like really dark. That's kind of what I was talking about, how it's like light bounces. I think you might be able to see it here if you look in this corner as well. So right here, that's the rendered version right now with the preview, but if you turn it up, then you're getting like a lot of light in there. So I'll turn that down to like 25, and then I'll also pull up some photos just so we can take a look at that. Hyperlight final. Okay, so this is Hyperlight 0, and this isn't the exact scene that I'm doing. This is just one that I think I brought in and just turned on, like I just turned on realistic. So there are some other effects on there, but this is just isolating that, like the one change in the effect. So here we have Hyperlight 0, 25, 50, 75, and 100. So where you're seeing this is really like in the trees, in the corners here. Like if I kind of go through it quickly, you can see how that changes. And sorry for the clicking. But I will say this, that you might kind of be like, if you notice that it goes like 25, 50, 75, 100, it like 25 is halfway up. And the reason, I'm not sure the exact reason of that. I think it's just because of how light kind of works with like, or maybe they just want it so that like the higher effects are near the bottom. I guess I don't really know. But you will see that like 0 to 25 is a very big difference. Like you're getting a lot of lighting when I go like this. But if you go from 75 to 100, it's really not as much of a difference. Like you are getting some. So I guess that's something to keep in mind. Hyperlight at 25 is actually normally pretty good. Like if you use the realistic effect, like the built-in effect, that is basically what you're going to get every time. And I think it looks completely fine. It does give you some bounce lighting without, looking too crazy. So that's just what I'm going to put in for this one. I'll just set that to like, just type it in because you can do that now. 25 Hyperlight. So so far it's looking pretty good. I'm actually thinking I'm going to move it back a little bit because I want a little bit more in the scene. And I also think, well, actually, I guess there's no point in changing that because, like I said, I'm going to bring in an HDRI. And I guess that's a pretty good time to do it now. So I did actually make a video about this today. I will leave a link below because I'm not going to go through that too much in the video here. Like I'm not going to show you how I do it. I'm just going to kind of go and pick an HDRI out. And I'm going to bring that in now. All right, so here that is. I'm going to go back. I'm going to drag this up. Oh, oops. Need to drag it up. I was just going way off in the distance. So I'm just going to drag this up. Maybe go like 40 meters. And then I'm going to hold L. I'm going to drag it down. I need to make this way taller and way bigger. And this one, it can be a little bit weird to set up. But as I said, I really think that this is kind of like the best way of doing it. So I'll drag this up more. Probably going to keep going actually. Grab it. Go up. And as you can see, the saturation stuff is really high on this. Like, I don't know if that's necessary to go that high, but in the example I was showing today, I just want to turn it up so people can like really see it. And I think that that's looking good. I'm just going to move it out a little bit more. So it's like kind of like this way more. Okay, I think that's good. So let's just kind of go here and see how that looks in the scene. So I think if I put it like right here, just adjust that a little bit more, so because I want more of the sun in there. Now this sun is like really the skylight is really saturated. I was only doing that as an example. So let's pull up HDRI Haven right now, and let's find one that we haven't used before that's going to fit our scene. So we could do something like maybe even something like that. I think that these trees are a little bit tall though, so they may kind of poke out. So I don't know if I want to use that one. This is the one that's in the example there. I think I want something with like clouds though. So that one wouldn't be too bad, but I am going to try a couple more. You know, that one wouldn't be too bad too. I think I like something like this one though. Yeah, with like a bit of sun coming out. We'll do that. And okay, so we just go here and download the 8K tone map JPEG. I'm gonna hit build, click on this. Materials, go to my downloads, small rural road, and this might just take a second. It normally does, because it is an 8K texture, so Lumion has to process that and convert it into DDS. Give it a sec. Right, so what I kind of like about this one is that it is cloudy, but it also still looks bright. And what I want to do is I just want to kind of, I'm going to go into the maybe emissiveness. And this is what I was talking about, where it's like if you do it like this, you can get like exact control over it. So something like that seems pretty good. The saturation can probably come, maybe actually I'll keep it right there, because this is like, there's so many clouds that you're not getting too much blue and it doesn't look unrealistic. Like if we go into that mode, yeah, like I think that looks pretty good. But let me just double check and make sure where the sun is on this one, because I don't want to make it seem like the sun is coming out from like behind the clouds. So yeah, I think it's coming from this area, so I might just twist it a little bit so it lines up better. And to do that, you just go to content library. I'm going to click on this, rotate, and I'm just going to do that. So I'll go this way, and then I think that should be pretty good. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect with this. I just find that if you're doing like a couple stills, I just sort of like how this effect works. And then yeah, so that should be good to go. And yeah, and this is kind of what I was like talking about with skylight, that if you put it on like ultra, you can still get the effects down here, but now it won't change how the sun looks. Like if I was clicking this before, the sun was getting darker, but you don't get that anymore. And that's kind of why I like bringing the HDRI. And plus, if you have like an HDRI from an actual city that you're working on, you could just bring it straight in. So even though the buildings may look a little bit warped, you are getting the actual buildings in the background, and then you can just kind of adjust it. There's ways to make it so that maybe like the buildings might look like flatter. It's just like how much time you're willing to kind of spend on that. Okay, so I will go through global illumination quickly. Now this is one that I was kind of talking about where like I don't completely understand why this one's still in Lumion, because it doesn't work as well as Hyperlight, and it takes up a lot of render time. Like it's a very heavy effect, and I don't think many people really use it anymore. But if you turn it up, so as the sun amount goes up, it's kind of just taking away the shadows, and you're getting that like right here. So as you can see, if you go up like that and the fall off speed, it's kind of one of those things where it's like it's got a mix between like the sun amount and the fall off. So you just have to find like the balance that you want. The reduced spots, you can see that like right here. So I'm not sure exactly what causes that. I don't know if it's like a sun or if there's like just some lights here that like are making them kind of pop like that. But the reduced spots, again, it's kind of just like whatever fits your scene. And then the max sun distance, this one I think will affect like shadows. But yeah, I don't know. I wanted to go through that a little bit, but that's all you really need to know. I don't completely understand the select lights. Like I know that if you have like spotlights in here, like for some interior scenes, I've made it so that you click the spotlights and then it kind of looks more realistic like a lamp would, but it just like, I don't know. I might try and play around with it a bit more to see if I can get that effect to work. But overall, I wouldn't really recommend that you use this. The problem I have with it is that it's called global illumination. And I think a lot of people are looking for what Hyperlight does, but they think that global illumination is how you do it. So yeah, I don't completely agree with their scheme of naming it. Yeah, so I think that's just kind of confusing people more than it needs to. What I'm going to look at now is shadow. So shadow is a really important one, and it actually is one of the biggest ones for lighting. Like you'd think that shadow is not necessarily a lighting effect, but it really is, because quick example is if you take the brightness and go down to 0, now you have like really heavy shadows here, and it like having the brightness here, like it almost affects the contrast. Like if I go all the way up, so you're not getting like really any shadows, and then when it's down here you are. It might be kind of overridden a bit now by things like Hyperlight and Skylight, but you can see that based on just like the preview, kind of what that does. And this one is one that I really recommend you check out in the folder, because I did do a ton. That would take a bit of time to go through, but I will just kind of quickly go over some of the effects. So yeah, having it at like 0.2 brightness, I think that's pretty good. Or maybe it was like 0.1. So that's not bad. Something that I do is I like to turn on fine detail shadow. You're only really going to see it in areas like here. So, you know, you're kind of getting a little more shadows up by these railings, and the trees are going to have better lighting. But yeah, this got added in Lumion 11. If you're not using Lumion 11, it's not a make or break thing, but I do like having it on. I do think that it adds, it kind of hurts performance, but I think it's worth it. What I like to do too is I like to change normal to sharp. Now you can't see it too much with this scene, but what I'll do is turn on sharp and then move up to like somewhere in here, because what this basically does is it's making the shadows sharp, but then it's also saying like the sun is, you know, like further away, and so it's almost making like these softer shadows. And I find that actually works better than just using the shadow type normal. For the very least, you get more control over it, and you can kind of see how your shadows are changing. I will just pull those ones up as a quick example here. Let me just make sure I have the right one. So shadow, and then we have sun shadow. So as you can see here, you do kind of get like, you know, they're not incredibly different, but areas you can see it are like along this this ledge here, and then in the, like the balconies. So yeah, this is one you definitely want to get. But what's kind of interesting is that like it seems like this actually gives you the most effect, having it like in the middle. So maybe it's one of those effects that like Lumion kind of treats differently if it's at like, if it's like almost right in the middle, sort of like waxiness. But yeah, you can see that it does actually affect it. Like it's like this one has fairly sharp shadows. This one is, you can see it kind of here. It's like much softer, and they are different, but they are pretty similar. So, you know, it's not something you have to worry too much about, but that is just kind of how I go about doing it. You would notice this a lot more in an interior scene, like if there's like a plant blocking the window or something. Like I think that this looks much more realistic because the edges are much softer. Even though it's kind of weird that you turn on sharp to do it, like I find that if you just throw on normal, you really don't have any control over how it looks. But with sharp, these effects kind of come out more. And Omnishadow is one that you might see it a lot in the preview, but when I was actually going through and doing this, I wasn't really getting that much of an effect. I think that's just because if it's like an exterior, and there's a lot of other like lighting effects going on. Typically, when you're doing an interior, that's when you can notice it the most, because like a lot of these like little effects, like if there's like decorations, like there'll be like some omni shadows in like in the crevices, and also if you're doing like also doing an interior scene, like you can kind of get it like in the edges of the room, like in all the corners and things like that. So that's kind of what you use it for. So if I pull these up here, as you can see, like you are seeing a difference, but this is what I was sort of confused about, that basically the only time I see it is when it's going from 0 to 1, and all it's doing is really like, it's almost just like taking out the shadows back here. So I'm not sure exactly what's causing that. Maybe like Hyperlight's lighting it up here and then it's getting taken away. But you can see it when it's going from 0 to 1 up in the corners, but then going from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, I'm not seeing like any difference. So I think as long as you have it on, you're going to get the effect that you want. But anything past that, at least for this example, it's not making that much of a difference. Yeah, Omnishadow, really powerful effect, but it definitely works better in interiors. So yeah, so I think that the one that probably is the most important for exteriors is brightness. Like let's pull up some examples here. So this is a 0.2 brightness. I probably should have gotten a 0 as well, but you can kind of see what happens when you do render that out. And this is why I want to do it like this, is that the preview doesn't always show you like how it's going to look. And that's why it's important to kind of render out test scenes. So this one, I think it's good at like where it is at 0.2, because you do want to have a lot of shadows in your scenes. Like what I thought was kind of interesting is that when I see this image, even though it's the same model, what this reminds me of is like, it makes me think of like a render from like 2005, 2006. Like would you see in almost like an old video game where like they really did not have the shadows down at all. And like while the models weren't necessarily bad, it was not realistic lighting at all. So something like that, in my opinion, is much better because you're getting better contrast between the light and the shadow. And I guess that this is one that's worth pointing out, but I actually took the interior effect and exterior lighting, and you really don't see any. I think if you look like really close, you can kind of see like things changing on the sidewalk, but overall, I wouldn't worry too much about that one. Like I don't completely understand what the difference of it is. Like maybe it's different if you don't have real skies on and it's like the sun effect. But yeah, don't worry too much about interior and exterior. That one's kind of just a red herring. Shadow color too. This is one that just kind of changes like, I guess it's even kind of hard to see here, but the shadow color at 1, 2, and 3 isn't changing. But you can see it from 0 to 1, and that's another one of those effects where like I feel like there's just so much light kind of in exteriors that you're not really going to get that. So yeah, it's the shadow effect definitely has more power inside of interior scenes, but I do adjust at least the brightness of it and sometimes the color just to get like a little bit of a tweak. But the brightness is important in my opinion, because like if you lower that, you can get like a bit more contrast, and that's like just like your general that's just like your general shadows, how they interact. And this one I do want to have good contrast, so I'm going to take that and put it down to like 0.0. Can I see what that is? So 0.05, that's what it's at. And yeah, so for shadow, I think that's pretty good. I am probably going to go through at the end and just kind of show like what I would do to kind of set it up, because yeah, I am going through and adding in a lot of effects and changing stuff that I wouldn't normally. I just want to kind of show how it all works. So I will just kind of put that out there. And of course, exposure. This is one that's also quite important. This is the overall like light that's going to be in your scene. So if you find that everything is a little too bright, you can pull this in and just kind of bring it down a little bit, or maybe you need things brighter. I will show you quickly kind of what it looks like when you pull it in. So 0 exposure, there's no light getting in. This is what it looks like. But what's kind of interesting about it is that if you go up, so obviously that's like 0.5, 0.8, but then at 1.0, it doesn't actually make your scene white. When I actually thought that's what was going to happen. So I did think that was kind of interesting. So if there's no light getting in, everything is black. If you bring the light up as much as you can, it doesn't actually remove everything else in the image, because the light's not, the image isn't filled with light. There are some shadows and stuff. So that was kind of interesting to see how that worked. It was like, it's not really that important, but it was kind of just neat in my opinion. Okay, so exposure is in there. I'll probably just put that at like back at 0.5. That's kind of like the default. So I'm not going to change that too much. And I think we have a couple more here. So we have lens flare, which I'm going to do last because, as I said, I want to change that one to nighttime. If you are doing nighttime scenes, lens flare is probably the most important lighting effect in Lumion. But the one that we're going to look at now is color correction. This one is also extremely important. This one might honestly be like the most powerful one in Lumion, because this is kind of your where is it? Color correction. So this is almost like the closest thing you're going to get to being able to edit stuff in Photoshop inside of Lumion. I think what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to just pop this into the realistic effect, because I want to show you guys something I find sort of weird about it. So with color correction at 0.4, I just think that's too high. Like 0.4 is a very warm scene, and not to mention it also uses I think it's like a morning real sky, so it's already kind of a warm light. I think that it's fine at like 0.1 or 0.2 because it's still on the warmer side, but you are getting a bit more like, I guess, like bluish contrast in there. Tint I also bring down. I don't completely understand why it gets set to 0.2, because it, like, you might not really be able to tell this on the screen, but it does give it like almost like a pink hue. Like if we go all the way up, you get this purple tint, which if you're doing like some flashback scene or something, it kind of works. It's the same with like green. Like you just would never do this. So like having it at like 0.1 or like negative 0.1 is fine. I find that 0.1 looks a lot better though. Like as soon as you go below 0, you do kind of get that green effect. So I guess it's just like whatever fits the scene. Vibrance and saturation are very similar, but vibrance is like, it makes the colors stand out more, but it doesn't necessarily like remove the color from the image. Like if vibrance is all the way down, the image still has color, and if it's all the way up, it's just kind of making them stand out more. Like the oranges are much more orange, the blues are much more blue, greens are more green, that kind of thing. So having it up at like 0.1 might make the colors like pop a little bit. You know, you can go up a bit so that it's not like completely ruining your scene. But vibrance is one that you should be kind of careful using. The one that I will just kind of skip ahead to talk about too is saturation. Now this one doesn't necessarily say how much the colors pop out in your scene, but they actually, it'll tell you how much color is in your scene. So example, if I take saturation to 0, now there's no color in the scene at all. But if I go all the way up, then you kind of get the same effect as the vibrance. And if you combine the two of them, then it's just way too colorful, obviously. Like if you're going for some like stylized render, you know, I guess that it's kind of acceptable, but I personally don't like this because it's warping all the colors. Like this lamp pole is now like green. So I don't really use vibrance too much, because I find that if you kind of want everything to look a bit better, you can just turn the saturation up a bit and the colors will be a little more prominent, but it's not going to ruin your scene. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop back to brightness here. So brightness is, again, it's kind of like how bright the colors are just going to be in the scene. It obviously doesn't work like exposure, because if it's all the way at 0, it's not blanking out the scene, but when it's all the way up, it kind of works in the same way as like when the shadows are all the way up. This just doesn't look realistic like that. So I find like the brightness is fine if you just keep it at like 0.5. That's the default one. For a lot of these, you don't really have to do anything crazy. And in my opinion, color correction is great if you don't have Photoshop, but Photoshop is always going to give you a better image because that's what it's made to do. But if you are just tweaking a couple of things, this one's fine to use. Yeah, it's like, I do stand by what I say, but this is probably one of the most powerful ones for your image, but Photoshop just does it better. That's kind of the best way of looking at it. Now I could be wrong about this, but the gamma correction, this one is kind of weird. Like I guess that this might be like it, so you can like adjust it, I guess. Like I find that like between like 0.9 and 1.2, that's kind of like the best you're gonna get with like changing stuff with it, because if you go all the way up, it obviously doesn't look right, and if you go all the way down, it's just like a black scene like this. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure why it works like that, but having it at like even just keeping it at the default of 1 or like 0.9, like it gives you a little bit more contrast, I guess. Like we'll put it at 0.9 just in the spirit of changing things. But the last one I want to look at for this is the limit low and the limit high. when I made my interior scene doing the same thing, I didn't really understand what this was. Now looking back on it, I think the best way to describe it is this is almost like Lumion's way of doing Photoshop curves. Because as you can see, like if you bring up the limit low, like it'll just sort of change, like I guess it's just sort of like the effect that you get if you start messing around with all like the curves inside of your raw camera filter and things like that. So it is you know, it is good to use it, and it might be good to like put your finishing touches on, but I don't use it too much. Like I find that this is one of those effects that like it's very easy to kind of tweak stuff, and it's like you could sit there and sort of like change it over and over again, but it's like you kind of end up with the same thing. So it is kind of cool, but I really don't use that one too much. Like the ones that I use the most in this would be contrast, which I guess I didn't look at that one too much, but I probably should have. So I will just look at that now. So contrast, I actually recommend that you always pull this up to like 0.7. It should be higher than where it's at, because for those of you that use Blender, what a lot of people do right off the bat is when you're doing an ArchViz file is they'll go into the color management in Blender and then they'll just flip on medium to high contrast. So they'll go from the default and like kind of crank it up because it just looks better, in my opinion. Like it kind of clears up some of the haze in the picture, and like you don't really notice it until you pull it up. And that's what I'll actually do right now, because it might give a better example of what I'm talking about. So here is 0 contrast, and then 0.5, 0.7, which this is where I think it should be, and then 0.1. So 0.1 is a little bit strong, but if you look at these, like going from 0.5 to 0.7 is the best kind of example of how this works. So this is what your default would be. But this one, I find that it kind of just takes some of that brightness and just helps complement the shadows a lot more. Like the colors look a little more realistic. Like it just looks more rich. Now in this example, as you can see, like I don't think there was skylight really, or like too much hyperlight when I took it. So I would want these lit up a little bit more in here, but overall, like it's not that bad. Going like, yeah, you'd be fine at 0.5, but 0.7 just looks better to me. Like when I look at this and look at this one, it almost just looks like this one gets cleared up a little bit, like almost like a fog has been removed from it. So that one I really recommend. The other thing I will just pull up quickly is the limit lows. So I have some examples right here. So here's limit low 0 and 0.8. And when I say 0 and 8, I mean limit low 0 and limit high 8.8. And you can see like going from 0.8 to 0.9 is not that big, but this one actually gives a nice kind of effect. Like at 0.1 and 1.0, you're almost getting like this like contrast effect. So, you know, just using the contrast slider might be easier, but this is sort of what I mean by you have a little more control over how it's going to look. And this one is also, this is at 0.2 and 0.8. So it is a pretty strong one. But this one I find is making it almost look like more vibrant. Like I think that these colors here are a little too dark. That one is pretty good though. Like I think at 0.1 and 1.0, it's good. So if you just bring the lower limit up a little bit, and yeah, so same sort of thing. So at 0.2, you can see up in the corner here, like I think that this is just too strong. Like I wouldn't use that one. So I think, yeah, it's kind of in the sweet spot. And then that's just the saturation we were looking at. Okay, so color correction is done. Then the last one I want to do before I just kind of go through and quickly show you what I would sort of do, like the actual effects that I set up for a scene. Because up to now I'm just kind of going through everything. And I am not going to put any spotlights in this one because this is already a pretty long video. And I don't want to get too much into that now. I have actually made a video about exterior lighting that you are welcome to go check out, and I'll just show you kind of my workflow for doing it. But it does just take a bit to set up, and I don't want to make this video any longer than it has to be. So I will go back to this one. Now what I'm going to do is color correction. Temperature is down, brightness is good, contrast comes up. Maybe I'll even bring the limit low to like 0.1. The saturation, I think if I bring that down a little bit, yeah, and we'll like I said, I might just come back to how that works. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a nighttime scene from this. So there's a few things that I like to do for nighttime scenes. First things first is we'll just add in a custom style, add in night. We're going to add in 2-point perspective here. Okay, so that's looking better. I don't know why the sun is the effect that gets put in here. I don't want that. I want sky, real skies. And then I'm going to go and put in a night one, and I'm actually going to remove my HDRI for this. Or actually what we're going to do is we can just go and find a good nighttime one. But the nighttime real skies are normally good enough. Like, you don't have to do anything that crazy. If we go night, what's one that would be cool? Let's do this one. This one's kind of over the top. A lot of stars. Might as well use that as an example. So tower night. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into this mode. I'm going to grab this, and I'll have them both handy so that I can just flip back and forth. And I could just make a variation of it. I'm not going to bother doing that, just because like I said, I don't want to spend too much time messing around with that. And this will just take another second. Unfortunately, there's no easy way of kind of doing that. If I was actually doing this scene and I thought I'd be coming back to it and adjusting stuff, then what I would recommend you do is you do actually set up a variation control for it, because then that way it's won't be as bad. Oh, that looks really weird. Maybe this one is not going to work with us. Okay, so I'm just going to hide this one for now then. That's the first time I've tried a nighttime HDRI. I really don't recommend that. So we'll go invisible, and we'll hop back in, photo mode. Yeah, and then like I said, this one, like I find the nighttime ones work just fine. Like you're not gonna run into a problem. You just pick the one that you want. Like I think it's a little bit overkill. I might lower the brightness on it because like I don't want it overpowering the rest of the scene, but I think that looks fairly good. Maybe I will turn this brightness up a bit just to make it look like it's almost like a haze coming from the rest of the city. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn up sharpen a little bit because I like that. And exposure is good, color correction, turn the contrast up. Just so I know that this is all set up, I'll probably disable this effect. Maybe I will keep this in just so that it's not completely dark. That one looks good. And am I forgetting any effects? Maybe I'll turn Hyperlight on just to see how that looks. Not bad. I'm gonna add in Precipitation, and then we're good to add in lens flare. Precipitation. So I normally turn the particle quantity and size down. And you can mess around with these other effects. They're not really that important. The reason why I do this though is, as I said, I want this like kind of reflection on the ground here. So if we go into reflection, you can kind of see too like why speed ray reflections are so important. Like when I preview this, it's not showing up. Tick that on, and then you're getting all these lights on the ground here. So really recommend you use that. Or if you want, toss on a reflection plane. And then that actually might be a little bit too strong. If I go to normal, oh no, okay, that's okay, never mind. It made it look really bad when it was at normal, but that should be good there. So yeah, we're getting a nice, we're getting a really nice effect there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add in the lens flare. Now, this is, as I mentioned, probably the most important one for nighttime scenes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to camera, lens flare. Now, there is a few ones that I kind of want to go through the pictures with to help show how it works, but the best way of sort of describing it is, as you can see, like the master brightness, as this goes up, it'll kind of like blow the scene out, but this is what's going to give you that sort of like glowing effect, like especially where, you know, there's it looks like it just rained, so that means that there's probably a lot of like moisture in the air, and you're going to get this effect. I will pull up the photos here because this is the best way of looking at it. So what this one right here is, and sorry, this is a different example scene that I was just doing, but it gets the effect across well. So this is with 0 strength intensity, or streak intensity, sorry, not strength intensity. And then a 0.2 master brightness. This is with the streak intensity going up. And as you can see, as this is increasing, oh no, sorry. So the streak intensity is staying the same, but the master brightness is changing. So you can kind of see that quickly. So I think for this one, having it at like 5 is the best, because I want the lights to be pretty powerful. And like, actually, maybe I'll put it at like 0.2. Like, so this is good, but I want it a little bit stronger than this. So yeah, I think for that one, 2.0, sorry, not 0.2. Is going to be the one that we use, or we would use for this one. It's going to be different than the one that we're looking at. The other one that we can take a peek at is this one. I guess is just, this is just a single photo. So this is the Anamorphic streak amount. I don't completely understand this. I guess this is like one of those weird effects that you probably won't use. But yeah, I guess take it what it is. Like if you want to add some blue to the streak, you just pull it up a little bit. I just did the 0.1 at this one, or 1.0. But yeah, you kind of get that, how that works. The next thing we'll look at here is bloom. So when the bloom amount is at 0, it looks weird because you're getting those streaks coming out of the lens flare, like in the building, obviously, but it has like no, almost like core light to it. So this is what I mean. So when you go up to 0.5, 1.0, and then yeah, so just those 3 photos I have. But I think that this is even a little bit strong in itself. Like I wouldn't have the streaks like going out that far, but I just wanted to use that as an example. The streak intensity is way too strong on this one. I think all my example ones did that because I wanted it to be really pronounced so you could see it, but I would turn these way down so there's just like a little bit of an effect on the car lights and maybe in the building, but I don't want it to kind of take it over. What's really cool about this too is the way that they set up these textures has become emissive. I find these lights look really cool because the lights are just like really bright, but they look realistic. Like they don't look like it's almost just like kind of blowing out the scene. So that's really cool. The one that I want to look at now is dispersion. So here, as you can see, like so dispersion of 0, dispersion of 1. It changes basically how much color is inside of the streak. So this one is at 0. It's just like the color of light all the way out to the end of the streak. This one you get like that rainbow effect, almost like a prism. So yeah, that's how that one works. And for the ghosting amount, this one, I guess I can pull up the other photo because you might see it a bit better, but it's just like this. I'm not really sure what this is. Like I think that ghosting is like it's like the reflection in the lens of the camera, I think, like getting into the way of the shot. Maybe that's not what it is. Like I don't really know too much about photography. That's kind of what I'm assuming it is. So let me just oh, maybe I didn't make, oh, here it is. So in my other scene, this is the ghosting. It's a little bit easier to see because it's a bit more of it's a lighter scene. Yeah, so that's just kind of what that does. It's one of those things like maybe you just turn it up a little bit and you get kind of that like realistic effect, but I don't use ghosting at all. Halo is another one that like I don't think I'd really use it that much. Like if you look down around here, you're getting almost like it looks like it's another one of those things where it's like just how the lens is treating the light. So I mean, I guess in a way these all effects are all doing that, but it's just like it's such a small effect going from here to here that I don't think it's even worth your time to kind of fiddle with it. Like it's just going to waste it. But it's good to know nonetheless. So another one is the isolate bright pixel. This one is definitely kind of useful. What this does is this is like, it's a bit different from the master brightness and the bloom amount because it specifically only goes for the bright parts. Like if you, I guess it's kind of hard to see, but like these ones up here, like, or this area up here is really not changing. Like it's strictly the lights that are going up. So obviously like the windows are changing and stuff, but it's isolated only to these, like the brightest pixels, I guess. So it is sort of similar to master brightness and bloom amount. It is just a little bit different how it tweaks your image. And then lens dirt was kind of interesting. So this is another one like ghosting where it's like, you know, you're probably not going to use this. You know, maybe if you're making like a scene and you're like in the woods or something like that and you want to do this, like, I don't know, if you just want like an artistic effect, then the lens dirt can help with that, I guess. But you know, if you're doing like archviz, I personally wouldn't use this. Maybe like a really subtle effect can help add a bit to it, but I don't use that. Did I miss any here? So halo isolate, the streak fall off. So this one is actually kind of important. I think I'm gonna change this real skies back to the one that we were using so it's easier to see. I think night is what I had. Yeah, this one should be fine. So yeah, I'll hop back in lens flare here. And I'm gonna turn the master brightness up. And I find it kind of strange that these ones aren't showing as much here. And why is this not working with me? Like, why are I guess if I turn it all the way up, you can kind of see it, but like I said, this is what's kind of weird about using Lumion sometimes, because the just the way that like the effects can interact with one another. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get like sort of isolate it, and that's why I like to do what I do with like taking all those photos. So maybe I can't get this one to work right now, just because, like I said, I'm messing around with so many effects. It's kind of weird. If we go to, I guess I really don't have a good example for that one. Maybe if I go, oh, streak. Okay, so I think the streak fall off is the reason why. Yeah, sorry about the wait here. I'm just trying to make it so it's maybe doing it like, I guess you can kind of see it like this. I don't know why it's so difficult to see the, yeah, well, with at least with the streak rotation, you can kind of see how that goes up and down, and then the streak count just makes it so like instead of having 4, it's like, you know, whatever number is there. Streak fall off, obviously, as it goes up and down, that'll happen. Streak dispersion. So this one, yeah, this is the one I was talking about that changes the color and the intensity. It just makes it so that they're not as bright. But the bloom amount, that's how much is going to come out from the actual like light. So as you can see, like it's kind of giving that like aura around it. Master brightness just makes them all brighter. And I guess maybe that was the effect that I was messing up there. So if you go back to that intensity, yeah, you can see that a lot better now. Rotation, you can see a lot better. And then dispersion, if I go all the way up, it becomes like the rainbow effect. Okay, so I'll turn this back up. And maybe change the heading a bit. So it's like something like that. Yeah, and then, yeah, so if you are doing like nighttime shots, I would say that this is a pretty important one. Lens flare, like I don't see how you can really make it look realistic without it. And I turn this down more. Okay, so I did go through all of the effects for lighting. What I am going to do quickly is I'll just kind of scrap the nighttime one, I think, just because it's not really what I want to focus on. So I'm actually going to delete all of these effects for now, because I've gone through them all, and I'm just going to show you quickly, like if I want to do a quick render to make like a nice exterior, I'll probably take a couple minutes just to show you. So I'd probably go into realistic, and that's already set up in a really nice way. Like I like where the sun is coming in there. Sharpen, I turn up to 0.5 just because it's like it's kind of weird. It's like you can't really notice it, but it does change it a bit. Like it just makes your image obviously look a little more sharp and just kind of cleans up the edges a bit. Exposure, maybe it may not look like I'm turning it up. I am just tweaking it very slightly. And the color correction, I'm going to turn the contrast up, tint down, color down to like 0.2, because I don't want it to be completely cold, but I don't want it to like be like a really warm scene. I'm going to bring the limit low up to 0.1, and then that is looking good. Maybe actually that's a little too high. Saturation, maybe like 0.1 or 1.1, so it's up. I'm not going to touch vibrance here. Brightness I might bring down a little bit. I think that's looking pretty good. So Hyperlight, I'm going to turn on enable and preview, because by default it's not turned on, but I want to see how it's going to look. So this one I think I'm going to turn up to like 50. Not a huge change, but I kind of like that. I will actually turn on the sphere again. So I'm going to go back to the standard, choose color map, rural road. And yeah, this is unfortunately going to take another second because it's an 8K texture. So I could have probably turned it off in a better way, or just like hit it, I guess, or deleted it. That probably actually would have been faster, just to delete it altogether. Give this another second though. And I am going to turn up the emissiveness because I kind of like how this looks. So let's look in the scene. Does this look normal? It's too strong there, so I will turn that down more. Saturation, I'm going to turn that up because to make it more blue. Photo. So I think that is looking, that's looking good. And that's kind of what I was talking about with doing it individually. I am going to twist this a little bit more though, because I like how blue this is, but it's way too blue over here. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to go to, I'm not going to change the material orientation. I want to change the actual orientation. Just find that easier. So I'm going to twist that so it's like here, and that's perfect. And you can't really tell. I guess maybe I do need to flip that actually, because it looks like the sun is coming from over there. So if we just flip this, I think it's good. So I think I go materials. Now I will use it like this. So let's see what happens if I, oh, right, it's the import. Okay, so it's the imported. So it's the best way of doing that. I guess it's not important for this one. Normally what I would do is I just go in Blender and flip the actual thing so that it's like showing up different. But whereas the map scale is imported, I can't change that. Yeah, so I guess I'm kind of out of luck on that one, but it's not a big deal. And you know, maybe, yeah, maybe I could just remove it and use the real skies. Maybe I will just do it for the sake of this. But normally I would use an HDRI. I'm just trying to do this kind of as quick as I can. So I'll click on this, just delete it, and then that's fine. I am going to add in something with a little more shadows, I think. Oh, and I actually better save this before I lose that that place. So I'll go right here. And I know I did actually just move this, but that's fine. So I'll go like that. And I can put like a little bit of fog in, like I was saying, to kind of focus in on like that certain area. Or is it sky, weather? So fog. So what I'm going to do is fog density. I'm just going to turn it up so it's kind of taking these buildings out a little bit. Just kind of turns that down and focuses us more on the center of the image here. And you can obviously just play around with that. The fall off, it's whatever. I only want it on these back buildings here. Like I don't want this affected. And now that I actually see these, see the sky here, I kind of don't like how it's like very vibrant. So maybe if I guess that was actually not bad there. Saturation needs to come down a little bit, I think. Yeah, so if I did have it turned up, but you can see how much of a difference just putting it down to 0.1 makes. Like that went from, at least on my screen, looking like it was like too blue to just being acceptable. The real skies also don't look as nice in the viewport because I think they're scaled down. When you actually render them out, they look a lot more sharp. Oh, I don't know why I went out of that. So this is all looking good. Reflection. Okay, that was removed. Okay, good. Because I was gonna say, like, there's no point in using a reflection plane for this. I am gonna put the precipitation in because I like having the rain on the ground, but I don't want it in the scene. Oh, oops. So like that, and then I think extra fog addition. So that I'm gonna turn all the way down. Block bias is okay. I'm not even gonna touch that one. So that's looking good, and this just makes, like I said, this just makes the scene look a lot more full. And maybe I actually changed my mind and I want to have it like down here so that we can see everything going on. Yeah, it might seem like you'd be like, why am I kind of hopping around with this? I didn't practice this for the video because I wanted to kind of just go off the cuff and just talk through how I at least look at some of these effects when I'm doing it. So skylight, maybe if I turn it all the way up, should be fine. Saturation, I normally turn down to like 0.8. You know, I could do ultra. I'm just doing the one image, so it doesn't really matter. That one's good. Shadow, brightness, probably bring that, or keep that where it was. Omnishadow, like I said, doesn't really do anything, at least in the examples that I was. Shadow correction, not going to see too much. But what I am going to do is turn this on sharp and then turn this up to about 2000. Like I think that's where I found that it was the best. And like, yeah, this kind of shows you why I like this so much on the ground. It's, you know, it kind of looks like the street is like flooded, but people aren't really focused on that. And what it does is it just takes all of this, like it takes this monotone road and it makes it so that it's like, it's kind of has all this color in it. And you can even go back into precipitation, kind of change the phase so that there's not as much on the road, but I do really like having it there. And so what I'm going to do is reflection, and the speed ray is normally enough, but I am just going to go in and add that reflection plane back in, go into normal. And then, yeah, that slows down the scene a lot, but I think it's looking really good. Sharpens on, so add effect. Let's go through and just see if there's any more we missed. 2-point perspective. I'm pretty sure that was already on there. Oh, maybe it wasn't. Okay, so that's good that we added that in. Lens flare we don't need right now. All these ones are fine, but you don't really use them. And if this one actually... Okay, sometimes they put on the chromatic aberrations, or some of them. I don't really like using them. I find that like people only really use them with like a very small amount on it, so it's so small that I don't even know what people kind of bother using it for, honestly. And vignette's another one that you can use if you want to really focus in on it. It just kind of helps take the edges off your photo so that like it's really weird. Like it's not an effect you really notice. Like I like to have it just like this so it looks like shadows, because what it kind of does is it's almost like looking down a tunnel where it focuses your eyes in. Even like this subtle effect like that can just kind of help like to drag your eyes to the middle of the image and make it more interesting. And you can see like here's the softness, so you definitely want to have that pretty high up. Like you don't want this effect, because that almost looks like it's like, yeah, it just, that doesn't look good. Like you want to have it so it's like there are dark corners, but you kind of have to look for them, because like even if the shadows are in the corners like that, your eyes are going to get dragged in. And while it's not a lighting effect, it is a kind of a cool one. I think Photoshop does do it better, as I said, with most of this stuff. Like a lot of the time I'd say like if you have Photoshop, I recommend you kind of go in and do it that way. Bloom I'm going to add in, so I think I said like 0.5 is good, but I think even just something like 0.1 for this is good, because this is a really bright scene, but it is going to, I find it helps kind of give that natural sunlight look to it. Like the sky is really bright, kind of that artistic look. So I really like Bloom. And then advanced, yeah, I think that's everything I normally use. If you're doing a large scene and you're finding that there's like these kind of like weird, almost like rings going through stuff, or you're getting like these weird lines, you can turn on print poster enhancer. I'm probably going to make a video about that one, just because like it is actually important in certain situations that you have this turned on, because it can make your scene look a lot better, but it's like very hard to kind of isolate those things. So I'm gonna find some kind of perfect examples to use it, make a video, and people can see that. And yeah, so I think that's, you know, I think that's really it. That's everything that I would do to go through a scene. You could throw this in orthographic view. I probably wouldn't use it for this particular scene. Just because I find that it's kind of it's kind of hard to like get it. So if we go something like that, the pitch, so you might be able to make like kind of like an artistic shot like that. As you see, none of the corners are getting cut off. Wouldn't be too bad, but you don't need to do that. It's really just like whatever fits. I'll actually say though, I kind of like how that scene turned out like that. Like that's kind of a cool angle. You'd have to be lower, but maybe we can just lower it behind the horizon line. I actually like, you know, I kind of came across that by accident, but I kind of like this angle here, like how you're looking down both the streets. So that's pretty cool, but we are just going to render this out. And so, yeah, that's the final image. Maybe we'll do it on like 4K. No, actually I'll do it on the desktop size, because I'll make this the thumbnail. So we'll call this exterior, and then we'll just kind of take a look at how this renders out. And I may actually go through and change a couple of things. So this is looking good. But a note that I would make is that it kind of seems dark to me. So I think I'll turn up the exposure. And I also am going to turn down the skylight, because while it was looking fine in the image, it looks a little weird. So maybe I'll turn this down. I think actually if it was like this. So that's good. The bloom, I'm going to turn that up a bit. Exposure, I'm going to turn that up a bit. Hyperlight, maybe I'll just crank that, see if that works. Skylight, shadow, hyperlight, reflection. Yeah, I think let's try that one now. So I'll call this exterior 2. So it is still a little bit dark, but I think that this is a much better kind of base, because I am now quickly going to open up Photoshop or Lightroom. Either one works. They give you basically the same effect, but I'm going to take this now and I'm going to go in and I'm going to play around with it a bit, because in my opinion, Lumion has a lot of great effects, but you should always take your final renders and edit them in one of these like Lightroom or Photoshop, because there's just it has way more power than Lumion, and it's specifically made to edit the photos like that. So it's not too expensive to get. For the amount of money that you're spending, it's probably the greatest improvement to your renders that you're going to get. That's how I feel about it, at least. They ignore all these deodorant pictures. I was trying to do some photogrammetry, and that did not go well at all. So exterior 2, we're going to bring that in. Now in this one, it is looking a little bit blue, so I'm probably going to turn the warmth up a bit. Maybe I'll zoom in a bit on this. Probably bring that over, just so we can see it all. Now what I'm going to do is go to filter, raw camera filter. I'm going to, brought on this screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to turn up the temperature a little bit. I'm going to take the exposure, I'm going to turn it up, and see, like, as soon as I'm doing this, like, all of these, like, everything just lights up better. The highlights I'm actually going to bring down. So what this does is it's kind of taking away the bloom effect. Like, normally if I crank the highlight up, it's going to give that effect, but I don't want that. I want to kind of capture back some of this color and get away, like, some of this really bright stuff here. So as you can see, when I'm going down with this, like, I can just burn it all the way down basically, actually, because I want to have that kind of in the background. So maybe actually just a little bit, like right here, because then it looks like the sun is coming from there, but you can just see how it really picked everything up. You can just come in here and hit auto, but I like to kind of do it manually. So shadows is another one where, like, this just gives you more control over, like, especially like the ground. So that looks good, but I think I might bring it down a bit. Whites, like, I like to almost do this and see what I like more, like what way it's going, which might be kind of weird, but maybe like here. Maybe, yeah, the exposure is quite high on this one. You know, maybe a little too much, but it's, yeah, like I can kind of fix that. The contrast, or actually I'm going to leave that one where it was. The saturation is what I want. Yeah, saturation is what I want to change. So everything is looking a little too vibrant. I'm just going to bring this down, level it out a little bit, and I'm going to level it out with this a little bit. And yeah, and I just, like, it's obviously the colors are still there. It's just, it's not kind of blowing it out. And there's so many different things you can do in Photoshop with this, but I think that that's pretty good. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn up texture. That's a little too high. Texture, clarity, dehaze. And I find that that just kind of adds that last layer of, like, polish to your scenes to kind of help with that. Normally in my opinion, Lumion should be used to, like, really focus on getting, like, sort of like the meat and potatoes of your shot. But you can sit there in Lumion and mess around with, like, the exposure, do all this different stuff, but at the end of the day, Photoshop is just better. Like, I think that if you're kind of stubborn on getting Photoshop, GIMP, or anything like that, you should kind of at least give it a try. I think there's one called, like, it's like, I can't remember the name, but it's P something. I'll kind of dig that up. I was going to make a video about that because it is free. So I know not everyone can get Photoshop at this time, you know, especially even though 2020 is over, it was a rough year for a lot of people. So if I can get that free one, maybe I'll put a link below and you can kind of do that. You should be able to do all this same stuff. And then, yeah, the curve, this is actually what I was talking about with the limit low and the limit high. I think it's kind of similar to this, but I won't get too much into that. So yeah, I think that that's really it. You know, you can kind of play around with this. Like, if you want more contrast with the shadows, you can do that. But I think that, you know, I think I'm pretty happy with how this looks. Even though this video took about an hour and a half, I think that if I was, honestly, like, if I had the model done, everything was textured, and the time that it takes me to go from unfinished model to, like, the finished render, I could easily do it in 5 minutes. You know, the model is going to take me more time to set up, and it's like anything. It's like like, if you have, like, a SketchUp file, if you're willing to spend a lot more time on it to get more details in it, it's going to look better. But shots like this in Lumion actually wouldn't take that long to set up, because all of these buildings here weren't modeled. Like, basically this one here was modeled, and then that's a Lumion building, Lumion building, Lumion building. And I think they actually came out with some, like, newer buildings lately. And so yeah, they actually have, like, reflections on them, and they look really good. So yeah, this is the only thing that was really modeled. You know, I think that I could probably do this whole thing in, like, 3 or 4 hours if I, like, kind of knew my direction and I was, like, going forward with it. Maybe longer than that. Maybe it would take me a full day, somewhere in that. But the actual rendering part itself would probably take, like I said, like, 5 minutes. And that's really where Lumion shines. I do just think, though, that, like, Lumion is great at what it does, but don't push it too far. Like, once you have a finished image, always bring it into a photo editor, because you can just see, like, how much better control you have over your picture, like, especially with things like exposure. So yeah, hopefully you guys found this this video interesting. This is one that I was planning out for a long time, just kind of thinking about what I was going to say. And, you know, I do kind of wing these when I do it, like, because I don't want to sort of overthink what I'm going to say, because I want you guys to kind of see when I'm doing it. Like, I look at something, I go, like, oh no, the saturation's too high. Like, oh no, the contrast is too high. Like, I want to look at something and not have, like not have something set in stone. I want to have a game plan for when I'm making a render, but I don't want to say like this is exactly what the value is going to be and then that's what the value is going to be, because it just doesn't work like that. The images you're working with are too different on image to image. So I want to say like, okay, I'm going to do maybe contrast, saturation. I'm just going to play around with it. And it's very rare that I go like, okay, contrast is done, saturation is done, because as you add more effects in, it might change the look, and then what looked fine before now changes. So I kind of do like almost like a circular motion where it's like I'll check something, change an effect, you know, change another effect, come back, change it again, and just kind of keep doing that till I'm happy with my base render. Send it over to Photoshop and finish it up. So I'm pretty happy with how this came out. You know, mind you, this was done by 10 Over Studio, I think, and they obviously did, you know, all the modeling work and stuff like that. But I just kind of wanted to focus really on the effects. So if you found this video interesting, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and help me grow the channel, help me with the YouTube algorithm, and then also just join me for some future videos I'm going to make. If you are already subscribed, thank you very much for supporting the channel. And yeah, hopefully if you guys found this was helpful, I can do this with more scenes. And at the very least, please download the folder from the Google Drive so that you can kind of flip through these yourself. I'll also leave a link to the original video that I did with this, but there also have a lot of great effects in there that you can kind of flip through. I just didn't put the actual sliders in. So that's something that I kind of wish I had done. But maybe I'll go back and just change that, because I can just go and do that anytime I want. So yeah, thanks again for checking out this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a great night.